Hey everyone, today we're going to learn and demystify conditions, whether you use conditions or not, or you've tried to use conditions and you can't really wrap your head around it. We're going to talk about what conditions are and break down the different parts of a condition. So hopefully you understand it a little bit more and can start using it inside of your learning development. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, welcome back. My name is Jeff Batt, and if you haven't checked out my website already, go ahead and check out my website at learningdojo.ninja. Here you can check out all previous blog posts. Now I cover everything learning development related, so Storyline 360, how to get the best quality from your microphone, Camtasia, XAPI, all the different things you need for development. I also have free templates. You can download free templates and articulate Storyline 360 or XAPI templates as well. Or if any of these topics are new to you, you can check out full courses covering everything from A to Z in Articulate Storyline 360, Adobe Captivate, XAPI Fundamentals, Camtasia, Articulate Rise, Custom SCORM, and HTML5 video. Now, I've taught a lot of new students, both in person and online, how to get started with developing different types of training using Camtasia, using Articulate Storyline, and also Captivates. And one of the things that I've always seen people struggle with is wrapping their heads around conditions. Now, triggers, they can figure out, okay, when the person clicks on, I'm going to have them do this. Events probably struggle a little bit more of when those triggers can happen and the different types of events that you can do. And I just created a video on events if you wanted to check that out. But the next step is actually conditions and really understanding conditions and when you want those conditions to happen and so forth. So we know that a trigger is basically telling Storyline or telling Captivates, whatever tool you may be using, what to do. And then the event is telling it when to happen, like when the user clicks or when the user, the timeline reaches the end or something like that, that is the event. The next part is you may not want that to happen every single time. Even though that event happens, you may want to have that happen only in certain situations. So that's really where conditions come into play. Now, there's a couple of different aspects about conditions that will help you kind of grasp or wrap your head around conditions and so forth. And if you can really get this, it really takes your learning development to the next level. So that's why I wanted to demystify it, to break it down and talk about the different parts of the conditions. And then we'll get into Storyline and we'll see how those conditions can be applied to different triggers as well. Whenever I talk about conditions, I use this simple primary phrase, and you may have heard it, you may have not, but it's part of a song. And it's basically, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. There's a couple different things and important parts of this phrase that illustrates conditions. And if you can apply any type of programming, whether it be in Storyline or anything else, to the real world, I think it helps wrap your head around this, especially when you write it out and so forth. Here we have a couple different conditions in this phrase. Let's talk about the first condition, which is essentially if you're happy. Condition number one is we're not going to run this action until this person is happy. Well, if condition number one is true, then we can go ahead and do this action. However, there are two conditions part of this phrase. The first one is, am I happy? The second one is, do I know it? If you're happy and you know it, that really takes those two conditions and it puts it together. So I have to be happy and I have to know it in order for this action to happen. Well, what is the action? The action is that I clap my hands. I'm going to clap my hands, but only, and that is a key word right there, only if I am happy and I know it. What if I'm not happy and I don't know it, or, I know it and I know I'm not happy, then that means I'm not going to clap my hands. That action is not going to happen. So if you break it down, okay, if I want to click on this button only if the score is this amount, if that score is not that amount, what do I do? So I might have to have like a backup action or something. So really the key word, whenever you're kind of writing things out or you're developing or designing, the key word is if. If you ever see this, if or only or those types of keywords, it's a good indicator that that is going to be a condition. I want them to go on to the next page only or if they've clicked on all four tabs. That means I need to have a condition. So look out for that keyword. There is something that will help you think through this called pseudocode. Pseudocode is essentially writing whatever you want to have happen out in human language. And so if you want, again, going back to the tab example, if I want the learner to visit all 4 tabs before they move on to the next page, then I would write that out. User has to click on all 4 tabs in order to move to the next page. And so that user has to do this before is also another keyword there. Let's take a look at this phrase right here. When you click on the next button, it will go to the next page, but only, there's our keyword right there, if the score is greater than 5. Let's break this down a little bit. Click is the event when the user clicks, and that also is a good indicator because that's usually the event is usually when I will add my condition or where I will add my condition. As soon as the user tries to click on the next button, we're going to run this condition. That is also something that kind of trips students up as well, is when do I put this condition? Do I put it when the timeline starts, the timeline ends, on the button click, and so forth? Writing out this pseudocode in this phrase will help you kind of establish and point out that event. The next thing is the object. Click is the event, and then the object is the next button when they click on the next button. And then the action is going to go to the next page. When we're inside a storyline or Captivate, we have to have some type of action. And what is it going to do if this is true, if this actually happens? Here is the keyword right there. Only if, that is basically, okay, I know I need to have a condition here. And then here is our condition. The score is greater than 5. That means it could be 6, it could be 7, it could be 8, it could be 9, and so forth. It just has to be greater than 5. And that means it also, because I'm not saying greater than or equal to, it has to be greater than 5. So it has to be 6 or more. It can't be 5. Let's break down the condition. So we have our if, which is our indicator describing that we need to have a condition. We then go on to 2 different possible choices here. We are either going to have that condition be true, which is going to give us a true value. If that condition meets the criteria and it's basically, yes, this condition exists, it's going to go true, and then it's going to run this action, whatever the action is. But what if it's not true? And this is where I see some students always kind of get mixed up a little bit because they will establish the condition to see if it's true. But if the user clicks on the next button and nothing happens, that means the condition wasn't met. But to the learner, this is a perceived error because this is, I clicked on the next button and nothing is happening. If you've ever gotten that feedback, that's because we didn't take into account the false part of this condition. We have the condition that if it's true, let's do this, but what if it's not true? That is where this false kind of comes into play. And really, conditions will either give you a true, this condition is met, or a false, this condition is not met. So we have to have this else kind of action that will happen, this backup action. What happens if that condition was not met? Go in with that mindset of like, okay, if this condition is met, do this. If this condition is not met, what do I do? Do I show a layer, give them some type of instruction that they need to complete, or they need to fill out the form, or they need to get to a score of 80 or something like that? Typically, conditions have this kind of 2-sided coin, true or false. So keep that in mind. So let's go back to our phrase here. So we know we have the events, we know we have the object, and so forth. But what if I want to have more than one condition? I can add on to this condition. I could be checking several different things. So condition number 1 is score is greater than 5. Well, in this case, the condition number 2 is that tabs are visited. I want to make sure that the score is greater than 5, but the tabs are also visited here. And there is a keyword in order to kind of combine the two here, and that is this operator. The operator is usually an and or an or. We have ands, this condition and this condition both have to give us that true value. If both give us that true value, meaning that the score is greater than 5 and tabs have both or all been visited, then it's going to give us kind of this overall true. And so we're combining these together. But we can do it a little bit differently. So we have 2 different options. Our score is greater than 5, and it's combining these 2, and both have to be true in order for this to run. Both are going to give us this true, which will give us this overall true. But there's another option. So instead of and, we can actually use or. If we use or, this actually changes it up a little bit because I'm not needing to get true from both of them. I'm actually needing to get true from one or the other. If the score is greater than 5, it will run, even if the tabs have not been visited. It has to be like one or the other has to be true here. That means if tabs are visited, but the score is not greater than or equal to 5, it will still run because I'm looking for one or the other. I'm not looking for both. If you're looking for both conditions to be true, that's where you use that and. And you can establish this in Storyline, but it takes a little bit of kind of writing it out and getting it used to wrap your head around it. But this operator is important because it basically takes these two different conditions and allows you to work with it in two different ways. So that's why I wanted to point that out. We have the object, we have the event, and we have the action. The object is the button or whatever happens. The event is, okay, when does it happen? And then the action will run. A condition in this case, we can have that object and we put the condition before the action here. And if we're wanting to add a condition. So the object, event, and action is if you don't want any type of condition. Object, event, and conditional. Now this is where we check. So we pause for a second before we run the action and we check. If this condition is true, we run the action. If the condition is false, we run the else action. And we'll dive into Storyline and show you where this kind of all comes to play inside of here. So let's go ahead and go into Storyline, and I have a couple different things set up. I have a simple add score, and now I'm adding both of them. Let me go ahead and minus this one right here. So I'm gonna subtract, if they click on this, it will subtract the score. And if they click on this, it will add the score. Now I have a variable and that variable is showing. The problem with this, and I'm gonna go ahead and preview it, I don't want this to go below 0. If it is 0, I want it to stop. I don't want it to subtract anymore. Because right now, if I add this, you'll see that this is 2. If I go down here, I can go down below and I don't want it to go into the negative. So that's really where if you want something to stop or if you want something to not happen in certain situations, you need to use a condition here. So I'm going to go ahead and come into here, and my object is this minus button because I don't want it to go into the negative. The negative will usually happen if I'm minusing it. I don't really necessarily need to add it to the add object, but I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and I can double click on this, and on any action inside of Storyline is where you can add this condition. Now inside of Captivate, you can add that inside of your advanced actions. So I'm going to come in here. And here is my condition. What is that condition? Let's think about it for a second. If the score is 0, then I don't want this action to happen. That means if I want the action to happen, to get that true, it has to be greater than or equal to 0. If it's less than 0, then it's not going to happen. That is really my condition. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say if score is greater than, and this is where I can change that operator here. So you can see that if keyword right here. If the score is greater than or equal to 0, it's going to be probably not even equal to, but let's just test this out for now. But if it's greater than or equal to 0, it's going to subtract. Well, what happens if it's not? That's where this else comes into play. So we have our true action. What happens if we get that false? Well, in this case, it's kind of self-explanatory that it's just not going to go below 0. So I don't need to have that else action in this case, but I'm going to show you when you probably do need to have that else action. So I'm going to click OK, and let's go ahead and preview this again. Let's add to our score and let's minus the score. But you can see here that I probably need to change it because I don't want it greater than or equal to, probably just greater than. And I wanted to point that out there because you may run into this type of situation right here. Let's go ahead and change this up a little bit. And I don't need to double click in this case. I can just select the drop down box right here on this greater than or equal to symbol here. And let's just do greater than. All right, so let's go ahead and preview this just with that one little operator change. We can now see if this will work. It will increase and it will decrease down to 0, but it will not go below 0. So that is one way to apply the condition. Let's go ahead and try something different here. What I have here in this slider, it's going to adjust a variable called percentage. When you up it, it's going to go up to 10. When you decrease it, it's going to go down to 0. Now I have all these triggers that are listening for that percentage to change. As soon as the percentage changes, it's going to change that state. And so I have the state up to 10, and it will decrease and increase that state. But right now the problem is, let's go ahead and adjust that. Because I don't have a condition, as soon as I just go up to 1, it's going to jump up to 5. Because what happens, let me come back into here. What happens is all of these triggers run at once because it's just listening for the variable to change. It doesn't have any type of condition here. It says, oh, the variable changed, increase it to 1, increase it to 2, increase it to 3, increase it to 4, and increase it to 5. It jumps all the way up to 5 because this is the last one. That's where we end up. It goes from top to bottom. I'm going to add this condition, and I'll speed up this part of the video, but I'm going to add this condition for each of these triggers. If the variable changes and it's equal to, the percentage is equal to 1, then it's going to change it to the state of 1. Let me go ahead and add that condition to all of them here. All right, so I have conditions on all of them. So if it's equal to 1, it's going to change it to the state of 1. If it's equal to 2, it's going to change to the state of 2. Let's go ahead and preview this now. I'm upping the score. You can see it's now 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Just with the conditions on that, I'm able to change the state, and it will also decrease as well as the variable changes back to 1 or 2 and 3 and so forth, because I only want those states to change in the condition. Now you may be asking yourself, okay, what about that else section? When do I need to have that else section? So in this case, we've worked with the conditions always being true, but we may want to have it, okay, I don't want to go to the next page unless this is 2 different conditions are met and we go on to the next page. Let me go ahead and just add in a layer that's going to alert my student, and I'm going to insert a little caption. Now this caption is going to pop up if the learner does not meet that condition. This is where the else comes into play. You need to have something that will just let them know. You must get a score of 5 and percentage of 3 or greater. That's good enough for now. I'm going to go into the gear icon, and I want this to only show up for a couple of seconds. If I go into the timeline here, notice that the timeline is 5 seconds. Let's make this 3 seconds real quick, and then click on this gear icon. And then what I'm going to do is hide layer when the timeline finishes. So as soon as the timeline finishes, it will go away. That way it'll just pop up for 3 seconds and then go away, which is really nice. Let's go ahead and come into our next button right here. Now the next button, I want to prevent them from going on to the next page unless the score is equal to, and I forgot which numbers I chose, score is equal to 5 and percentage is equal to 3. Going back into that plus or the next button, let's go ahead and add on that condition. All right, so the condition number 1. Condition, it means that the score has to be greater than or equal to 5. Or let's just do greater than, it has to be more than 5. We need to have 2 different conditions. The percentage needs to be greater than 3. Or let's do greater than or equal. So it can be 3, but it has to be either at least 3 or greater than. Okay, so in this case, it's going to require that both of these be true because I'm using this and to bring it together. If you change this to or, that means one or the other has to be true. It doesn't matter if both of them are true, just one or the other. So I want both to be true in this case. Now, if I run this here, and this is what I'm talking about, that it could be perceived as a user error, what happens if those are not true? I'm going to go ahead and click on next here, and you can see that nothing happens. Now, this is where the learner may say it's broken or it's not working, but the truth is they haven't met the condition in order for them to move on. Let's go ahead and meet that condition. So we know that we have to have the score greater than 5, and this at least has to be greater than 3 or 3. Now, if I click on next, let me have this a little bit greater than. That's still not working. Let me see. Score is greater than 5. And oh, I did not change this to 3. So let's go ahead and change it to 3. And I think I chose less than. We need greater than. Okay. Now this should work. Let's up that. Let's change this to greater than 5. And then it will move on to the next page. It gives me a little alert because I only previewed this page, and that's fine. I at least know it's working. So I'm going to close this out. And now what we're going to do is we're going to decide what happens if that false comes into play, if it's not true. If you go back into the action here, there is a new section as of, I think, a few months ago, but there's this else section. Before we had to add another trigger to meet the other condition if this wasn't true. But the else is basically what happens if we get that false, if those conditions are not true. Well, if the conditions are not true, in this case, we want to alert the learner. All they have to do is add on that backup action, as I like to call. That backup action is going to be show layer, and that a layer, we only have one layer, so it's going to be alert. So I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to preview the entire project, which I have 2 slides just so we can see all of this working here. And let's go ahead and add on our score, but let's make it below 5 and let's make this above 3. So one of the conditions is met here, but both of them have to be true. In this case, it's still not going to work. So that alert is going to pop up for 3 seconds and then it's going to go away. That means I can try again, now have both of them there, and now we'll go on to the next page. Hopefully this explanation and these examples have at least helped you understand conditions and the power of conditions. I'm going to have more videos as time goes on of how to get the most out of conditions and how to create different interactions. But I at least wanted to set the foundation before we get more into more of those interactions. And if you haven't checked out my website already, I do have tons of different blog posts on learning development. I also have different templates that you can download for free. I also have full courses if you wanted to basically start from scratch. I have full courses, everything you need to know in Articulate Storyline 360, Adobe Captivate, XAPI Fundamentals, Camtasia, Articulate Rise Custom Scorm, and HTML5 Video. Also, if you like this video, head on over to my YouTube channel, click that like button and subscribe to my channel and hit the bell notification so you get notified of all future videos as they come out. It really helps my channel, allows me to continue to make these videos for you. And if you have any other questions, I do check my YouTube video for questions. So if you go onto my YouTube video and ask any questions or let me know if anything else that you want to see, maybe there was something that's still not clear that I can help you with, head on over to my YouTube channel for that. But that's all I have for today. So thanks everyone, and I'll see you next time.